On the Hannon factor, though, I mean, I noticed that going on to your eye catchers here, you've picked out a horse that I thought was incredibly impressive at Ascot, Ninjago.
Yeah, I think this was one of the horses that Toronado was supposed to have been whooping on the gallops, wasn't he? But
that's right.
I put this down as one to put in the eye catchers straight after the race. He's gone up £10 as a result, and I must admit I wasn't quite expecting that. But then when you watch the race and you think, gosh, he's setting him a lot to do here. And the way he quickened, I guess he probably has quickened by the rest of the field, was so impressive. And I thought I'd leave him in, not necessarily one to steam into next time, because Ascot form on the straight course doesn't always translate elsewhere. But if he ever comes back to Ascot, he'd be one I'd be interested. There aren't a huge amount of races over this trip for 3-year-olds, unless you're running the Woking or something like that, or one of the Group 1 races. But that was really impressive, wasn't it? Every time I watch it, I think that was. And when you see a horse travel like that, Ascot, he's always going to be of interest if he comes back to that particular track. There's 2 or 3 in the eye catchers today that are kind of course specific that I'd be interested if they go back to the track where they ran at. Yeah, well, that moves us nicely on, Hugh, to Cracker Jack, who ran a good race on the same card, again coming from a mile back off the pace. Yeah, this was when I timed it, I thought this was slightly more strongly run than the other mile race, but possibly still not run at a frantic gallop. And he's another one who he doesn't really get the run of the race in the closing stages either, because he has to thread his way through, and he doesn't get the clearest of passages. And he does well to finish second, possibly a shade unlucky not to win, but this was his first run at Ascot. He's been around for quite a while, but this was his first run at Ascot, and the track clearly suits him, that sort of big field scenario, and he should get more opportunities. He's probably a bit low for the really big handicaps at the moment in the weights, but he runs all the way to the line, and he was closing in on the winner. I know they've finished in a bit of a heat, but that's meant that none of them have gone up much in the weights. And if he returns to Ascot, and a lot of his form had been over 7, but he was strong at the finish over a mile there, so over 7 or a mile, there's more races to be won with him. And Dandy Nichols has done well with Don't Call Me, who he kept bringing back to Ascot, and this could be another of the same type.
They seemed to be messing about with his distance last year, didn't they? He ran in the Silver or the Bronze Cup at Ayr, and then they tried him over 10 next time out of Redcar. So
Stable wasn't in the best of form last year, was it? For some of the season,
for their standards,
by their standards, and I think they seem to be going a bit better this year.
Well, I've just seen he's gone up £1 for that, Hugh. He's off 80 now, but he has been as high as 85.
Yeah, and I mean, that was clearly a very good run, and it suggested he's in top form, and he's only run up £1. So I think he's one to still be with. But I'd be particularly interested if he did return. He might, as I say, he's just a bit too lowly rated, perhaps, for some of the really good handicaps there. But there'll be a race for him somewhere along the line there. Okay, moving on to a couple of also rounds, if you like, at Lingfield on the Thursday. You've picked out here Labinas and African Oil, who are 5th and 6th. Yeah, there's a couple of races where in the Eyecatchers this week where I've picked out 2 horses who were definitely better than the result, but you couldn't really say how much closer they'd have finished. But this was a fairly tight-knit 3-year-old handicap, and just neither of them got much luck in running. You're looking at the yellow cap and the red cap. Labianus, from a stable that does very well with 3-year-old handicappers around this time of year. And African Oil had some very fancy entries last year, and while neither of them you would say are absolutely cruising and looking sure to win, they both get stopped in their run. It's very difficult to say. Labianus looked to be running on really well there, particularly, didn't he? And African Oil just didn't get any sort of a run as well. So I don't know where they would have finished, but they were better than the result.
God, that was a mess of a race, that wasn't
it? It was, yeah.
Ryan Moore shown to his best there.
Probably not a lot between the front 5 or 6 home and the 5th and 6th are better than the result. Yeah,
it must be so frustrating when you're just sitting out in the irons waiting for the gaps to appear. And you
that happens at Lingfield, doesn't it? Especially if you don't get a strong gallop, and all the punters are cursing the jockeys, but very difficult when you're actually sitting behind a wall of horses.
Well, it happens there more than any other all-weather track, doesn't it? Certainly compared to Southwell and Kempton.
Southwell, you never see that happen because they go a flat-out gallop, and it's a big long straight, and it's almost unheard of for a you occasionally get it, but very rarely.
Yeah.
Kempton, again, other than the 5 furlong and 10 furlong races, it's a long straight, so there's plenty of time for horses to
because the
get
gap,
out of trouble.
the false rail.
They've got the false rail. I'm not sure that's always the best place to go anyway, as it happens, but you've normally got long enough. Wolverhampton, they tend to swing wide off the rail, which means that jockeys have got a choice which way to go. Lingfield, it's that short straight, and they tend to go less of a gallop there probably than anywhere else, and that means that there's often 10 horses in contention turning for home.
Well, I know that a lot of good judges don't bet as much at Lingfield as they would at other venues for that very, very reason.
Yeah,
Jim McGrath,
I've heard that plenty. I know 1 or 2 people who quite like it because I guess if you can find a horse that's got that kick at Lingfield, I must admit I don't always find it easy, but I'm sure there are plenty who do.
Moving away from the all-weather, Hugh, on that same day, on that Thursday at Chepstow, a horse called Peak Storm caught your eye here. Yeah,
this is a long-standing maiden, and I wouldn't go overboard about the form by any means, because as I say, he's a maiden, and I just think he's a horse who, if he returns to Chepstow, he's run 3 times there. 1 of them was on his debut, and then he's run really good races the other 2 times. And he gets quite a long way behind here, but stays on in really good style. And they weren't really coming down the stand side this meeting. Not many tried it, to be fair, but most of the winners came right up the middle. And he stays on more strongly than the others that he's raced with, and he's never quite getting there. And I think he attracted a bit of support on the day as well. And while I'll probably be a bit cautious if he runs somewhere else next time, if he comes back to Chepstow, he finished with a bit of running in him there. He's only modest, but I do like the profile of a horse who's run a couple of good races at Chepstow, particularly if they haven't won, as he hasn't, because it's not quite so obvious in the form.
I was just looking at him running there, Hugh, and he was running on, wasn't he, at the end of that 7 furlongs? I mean, why don't they try him over further? There's encouragement to be had from his pedigree there. Do you think a mile and maybe slightly more than that might suit him?
Possibly, and the other thing is that Chepstow, the mile is on the straight course, so that's where I'd like to see him come back at some point. He's had plenty of chances elsewhere, but he was, as I say, he finished with plenty of running in him.
Right, one to look out for.
I've no idea. I couldn't tell you whether the pace had an impact, because you just can't do any sort of sectional timings on a straight track like that, I don't find.
Right, okay. A couple more here from Doncaster at the weekend. Map in Time and Dark Castle.
Now, this is an interesting race. You could look at this race 5 times and pick up 5 different horses to take out of it, and I think the first 4 home, for different reasons, are all going to be interesting. But I picked a couple who finished further back. Map in Time, you can see towards the rear in the purple cap, and Dark Castle in the yellow cap, racing very close to him. Neither of them really get much of a run, Map in Time particularly there. And I thought they both finished with a bit of running in them, having not got the clearest of runs. I do think this is a race worth watching a few times, because there's plenty to like about several performances in this, but both of those two are going on at the finish, having not had the clearest of runs. You do need to bear in mind that Doncaster can be a course that does suit late finishers. In particular, lately it's tended to favour horses finishing late on the stand side, but Dark Castle has only been that was only his 2nd run for Mickey Hammond. He's lightly raced for his new yard, and Map in Time has gone down to a mark of 80 now, which I think he's well up to winning off.
Right, yeah, just underhand riding there, wasn't it, in the end?
Yeah, well, he's got no chance from where he's ended up, so that's understandable. But they're not necessarily the 2 biggest. I mean, the front 2, the first 2 have pulled well clear and are both really interesting and progressive. The 3rd and 4th, I think, will be winning soon as well. There's plenty to like about a lot in that race, but I thought I'd pick 2 from further down the field.
From Bath, from the weekend as well, Arch Walker, who finished a decent 6th in this sprint handicap. There's him in the red headgear there in the centre. Yeah,
he's definitely not one to go overboard about, but he just fitted into the profile of, fitted into the category of a horse who's a bit better than the result. This was his reappearance. He's being ridden along here, but I thought he was just starting to stay on inside the final 2 furlongs when he didn't really get any luck at all in running. Just from about now, he's looking for a way through. He can't find a way. He's going to be switched to the inside in a minute, and again he finds no way through. And he's just lost all momentum, and you bear in mind as well he's lacking a recent run. He doesn't fly at the finish by any means, and I'm not saying he was unlucky not to win or anything, but I thought it was enough to suggest he's returned in good form, and he might go down a couple of pounds for that, and he's on a mark where he's usually competitive. No more than that.
Yeah.
He's not any better than a mark around 60, which is what he tends to run off, but he ought to be competitive next time.
Yeah, I think well worth having a look at, because he was just getting into a rhythm there when he got stopped.
Yeah, I don't know where he'd have finished, because he might have ended up needing the run. He didn't fly out when he did get in the clear, but he's lost his momentum as well, and he's definitely better than the result. Okay,
finally, before we go to a break, Malaysian Belay at Windsor. I've not seen this one either. This was on the weekend too, wasn't it? Just a couple of days ago on Monday.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure about this horse, but, well, I say I'm not completely sure. There's a couple of reasons why I've put him in. Firstly, he was dropped to 5 here, and he was just outpaced. He had been shaping over 6 as if it might suit him, the drop to 5, but he just wasn't quite quick enough to get there. And then he has to squeeze his way through next to the stands rail, and it became a bit tight. And although he does squeeze through, it probably didn't help his cause that he got a bit tight there. And they weren't really winning. I think there was one race, but there were a few races at Windsor that day where the winners came more 4 or 5 wide of the rail. I'm not sure if there was anything in it or not, but he stays on steadily. He's got quite a high head carriage. He might be a horse who might be worth a try in headgear at some point. Again, I'm not sure about that. He's travelled well on a couple of occasions over 6, and even when he won, he didn't quite find as much as it looked likely, so he might be worth a try in headgear. I just think there might be a bit more to come at some stage.
Okay, it's good to see Simon Dow at least saddling a few winners again.
Yeah, he's been having quite a good time. He's had 2 or 3 winners lately, and his horses seem to be running quite well.
Okay, Hugh, we're going to take a